Thank you for taking time to join us here this morning. We are here to ask legislative leaders to take action on redistricting reform legislation, Senate Bill 131 and House Bill 31. We gathered here last January to announce introduction of the bills and have since seen 59 representatives and 20 senators sign on in support. We have also seen the escalating battles in other states, with voters treated as pawns in an explicitly partisan battle for control of Congress. Pennsylvania has been the center of such battles in the past, and unless leaders allow votes on this legislation, we will be a target in the next few elections as millions of dollars are spent in ugly disinformation campaigns in a national battle for partisan control that provides no benefit to the people of Pennsylvania. The bills we support are the fruit of 40 years of effort by the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania. We have a timeline here of efforts going back. This goes back to the 1990s. We've discovered the League was actually working on this back in the 1980s. The bills we support are also the fruit of efforts by Common Cause Pennsylvania over the past 3 or 4 decades, the partner organization in the founding of our coalition. The bills incorporate feedback from dozens of bills introduced since 1985 and lessons learned from independent and not so independent commissions enacted in other states. Citizen mappers tested the carefully prioritized criteria in mapping contests and in community conversations focused on preparing testimony and fine-tuning our people's maps for submission to the 2021 Legislative Reapportionment Commission. The language of the bill incorporates advice from national organizations like the Prison Policy Institute and the Legal Defense Fund, and final review from the Campaign Legal Fund and Common Cause National Policy staff. The legislation would enshrine protection of minority voters in the state constitution, would narrow the overly large population deviations currently permitted in drawing House and Senate districts, and would permit more reasonable deviations than the one person to the person population allowed for congressional maps. The legislation is designed to provide accountable representation for all Pennsylvania voters, no matter where they live or how they vote, and to restore trust through a transparent public process and clear prioritized criteria. I am pleased to be joined here today by lots of volunteers, thank you for being here, and by 2 prime sponsors of the bill, Senator Tim Carney and Representative Mark Gillen. The third, Representative Steve Samuelson, had an unavoidable conflict. We will also hear this morning from several of the wonderful local coordinators that lead our work in various corners of the state, from one of our amazing summer interns, if he gets past an accident that stopped him on the way here from Indiana County, and he is now a law student at Widener Law, and we'll hear from one of our allies in the local community, Pastor Earl Harris, and from several members of our statewide working groups. Tony Crocomo, one of our very first volunteers and one of our most tireless speakers and advocates, will be offering closing remarks. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Carol. Good morning. I'm Senator Tim Carney. I represent the 26th District, which includes parts of Delaware County, which was home of the infamous Goofy-kicking Donald gerrymandered congressional district from 2012 to 2018. My hometown of Swarthmore actually formed a bubble that made Goofy's armpit. Come on. So that gerrymandering was a result of an opaque partisan effort from 2010 that should have never happened. We are now watching as redistricting has become a focal point of winning, and let's be frank, rigging elections across the country, rather than a way of fairly representing the people. First Texas, now a redraw in California, other states likely to come into the fold in the future to prioritize federal politics over the will of the people. Pennsylvania voters want fair districts, and I stand here before you advocating for myself and on behalf of the constituents I serve. We want and deserve fair and equitable representation in our democracy. And the election on November 4th and the retention of the Supreme Court was a signal that people are fed up with the status quo. For too long, Pennsylvanians have watched as political maps were drawn behind closed doors by those who stood to gain the most from them. This erodes trust in our democracy and leaves people, especially those who are already marginalized, feeling underrepresented. Creating an independent citizens commission will be a major step forward in ensuring that maps are drawn for the people, not for the politicians. That's why I proudly support Senate Bill 131 and House Bill 31, calling for a constitutional amendment to take back the process for the people. This legislation prioritizes genuine commission independence, equal access to data, public involvement, and clear mapping criteria. These provisions are crucial to ensuring that district lines are drawn fairly and without partisan bias. Our parties need to come together after too many tumultuous years of hyper-partisan politics and realize that an independent, citizen-driven, and more scientific redistricting process will cut the dysfunction. We need to put our country, our state, and our citizens over ourselves. I stand with Fair Districts Pennsylvania and my colleagues who are before you today, urging this legislature to support this legislation. Let's put the interests of the people over partisan politics and ensure that every voter's voice is heard. I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Representative Mark Gillum.
You were part of the 7th Congressional District, and
I was.
at the other.
You were at the other end
I'm
of it?
not sure it was the armpit or the end of the fingernail.
Probably the fingernail.
All right, thank you very much, Senator Carney. I'm not sure where I figured, since he was the armpit of that particular district, I was somewhere near the fingernail up at the top in the Reading area, and certainly that district, the way it was configured, violated communities of interest. I was coming back from a gym workout with my daughter this morning, and I had tossed some papers up on the back seat of the car, and one of them was a map, which I'll bring out here in a minute, of the 7th Congressional District. And I decided to use my daughter. Since you have 5 daughters, you've got built-in focus groups. And so I pulled out the map of the 7th Congressional District as it was configured, and I showed it to her, and I said, what do you think of this map? And she goes, Dad, that is really weird. Where did that come from? And I said, you know, with all the intelligence that we have here in the Capitol amongst the political class, you would think that we'd been able to come up with something better than that. If you, and I delivered newspapers as a Philadelphia newsboy, if somebody offered you this route to deliver newspapers, you would have immediately rejected it. If someone who is designing the states, you look at Pennsylvania, relatively square, if somebody had designed a state to look like this, you certainly would not have wanted to move into that state. Let's suppose that you were purchasing real estate and the realtor showed you, this is the plot, okay, that you'd be moving into. You wouldn't have the slightest idea where the boundary lines were, and so really it defies common sense. But what is most offensive, I think, about a map like this is that it violates the interests of constituents. It violates the interests of the average person in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We can't explain this. By the way, I voted against it. I'm pretty sure you're aware of that. We can't explain or justify why there should be such a map as this. My constituent community was violated. Ironically, when it came time for elections, there were people who had signs out for a particular candidate, and I talked with them. I said, you realize that you're not able to vote for that person, that's not your congressman? People were absolutely confused as to what congressional district they were in. And more importantly, and it doesn't matter whether it was this round of redistricting or the most recent round of redistricting, 62% of my constituent community changed. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know what that means? People who used to come into our office and share very personal information, all right, who were well known in our office, suddenly found themselves in another legislative district. And they said, Mark, why did you vote for this? By the way, I did not have a vote on this. They don't do this for us. They do this to us. This violates our constituent community. It violates those of us that are interested in transparent, honest political governance. I found it offensive, and that's the reason that I voted against this map when I had the opportunity to do that a number of years ago. Now, that wasn't necessarily an easy task because the politicians controlled the process, and obviously they were trying to leverage me into voting for this map. And I made it very clear that there was no circumstance under which I would vote for this map. Now, do you think the political class and the powers to be took that sitting down? You know what they said? There's going to be consequences for you. That's the kind of leverage that the leadership has when you continue this politicized process. And I said, you can park my car in the middle of the Susquehanna River, and my office can be down in the parking garage. There's no circumstance under which I will be voting for a map like this. And we should not be placed in that situation, and we should not have the political class trying to leverage this type of a vote out of us. I think we all know the history of this particular mapping here, and I think we can do better. Some of my colleagues are a little bit reticent. They may not like a particular element of the bill. Well, God bless you, because all of us get the opportunity to amend the bill. So if there's something you don't like about the bill, I will say this in the echo chamber of the rotunda, then introduce an amendment, recalibrate, and tweak. I don't expect any major piece of legislation to go down the pipeline unamended, and this won't be any different. The Department of State and the Ethics Commission will be involved, but we've got to get the political class out of map making. And why? Because it has been an abysmal failure, and it's time to render maps like this extinct, and it's time to make extinct the opportunity for the political class to produce in the future any maps like this, regardless of the party. We should not have partisan politics involved when we need communities of interest maintained. We need compact maps. We need contiguous maps that reflects the best interest. If we allow this to continue, Goofy kicking Donald will go off into the foreseeable future. This is a window for a constitutional amendment. We should take advantage of this amendment. We should move forward, and we should move out of the days of goofy legislative and congressional maps. Thank you, and I suppose I'm supposed to introduce somebody next here. The good Reverend, you're next. Thank you, sir.
How do you follow that? My name is Pastor Errol Harris. Good morning. I was with SNCC in 1964 in Mississippi, with Stokely Carmichael and others. Later on went to law school and then seminary. I pastored at St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church for 24 years. I practiced law for 25 years. I became the founder of Core Community Blueprint. And I stand before you this morning with both a sense of urgency and a deep conviction rooted in a lifetime of seeking fairness in civic life, in representation, in opportunity. When voting districts are drawn to deliver predetermined partisan outcomes, as we have seen by the statement of our representative in this region for decades, true representation vanishes. I witnessed this in Harrisburg, where district lines were shaped for 26 years by political gamemanship, more than the needs of families, children, and communities. So when I say the stakes are high, they are high. I mean it. For every father, for every mother, for every child, for every neighbor who hopes to be heard, the map matters. Across the country, we were seeing this pattern play out in startling ways. In Texas, for example, where minority voters once had 5 districts in which they could elect candidates of their choice, that choice has been dismantled to pack more seats for one party. As one Texas state senator testified in federal court, it's always the minority communities that end up being the pawns. And the warning signs are looming here in Pennsylvania, too, but Fair Districts is backing 2 proposals, House Bill 31 and Senate Bill 131, which would embed in our state constitution the creation of an independent redistricting commission and essential criteria for map drawing. HB 31 states plainly that districts shall comply with the United States Constitution and comply with other federal laws. It further provides that districts must provide racial minorities an equal opportunity to participate in the political process and may not dilute their ability to elect candidates of choice, whether alone or in coalition with others. In short, these bills offer a clear path toward honest representation. One person, one vote, and they deserve our full support. And why is that critical now? Because the federal protections we've long relied upon are under attack. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, specifically Section 2, which guards against the dilution of minority voting strength, is poised for serious curtailment by the Supreme Court of the United States. The court recently signaled that it may strike down federal judicial tools that protected minority districts for decades. Civil rights organizations are fighting this vigorously. In other words, this is not about maps, it's about people. This is why this legislation before us matters. The independent commission structure proposed along with requirements like counting the incarcerated persons at their home communities rather than prison sites and reducing population deviation across districts all serve to bring our system closer to the ideal of equal representation. HB 31 and SB 131 would repeal Pennsylvania's outdated legislative reapportionment commission, which has served special interests far too long, and establish transparent criteria for map drawing. My organization, the Core Community Blueprint, will, in cooperation with the Fair Districts PA and allied groups, work diligently now to prepare our families, our neighborhoods, our churches, and partners for Census 2030 and the subsequent redistricting in 2031. We cannot wait. We must act now. My plea to our legislative leaders is simple and direct. Pass HB 31 and SB 131 without delay. Secure our rights before federal protections shrink. Give all Pennsylvania communities, especially communities of color, a fighting chance, not just at being heard, but at being represented. In the tradition of the long civil rights struggle, in the spirit of community empowerment, and in the name of the faith I hold, I ask you to stand with us, because when maps are fair, families get a fair shot. When representation reflects us, our voices build stronger communities. That, friends, is how we honor our past and shape a future grounded in justice. Thank you. May God continue to guide our efforts, and may we together ensure every voice counts. And I now introduce the next speaker.
My name is Stanley Chapitis, and I'm a local volunteer from Indiana County, Pennsylvania. Back in 2016, I was preparing to retire after about 35 years as a university professor, and my retirement project was to start a small-scale organic vegetable farm and sell at local markets. Now, farm startups can be really expensive, and so I looked through the state annals to see what I could find in terms of granting opportunities. I knew who my state representative was, but I was surprised to learn that at the land that I had rented to build this farm, there was a totally different district and another representative altogether. In fact, Indiana County has just about 10 to 15,000 more residents than would fill one state legislative district. But at that time, we had 4 districts crisscrossing the county in very odd configurations. In addition to this, my congressional district was strangely appended by one thin line to a city that was over an hour and 2 mountain ranges away. It didn't look like Goofy Kicking Donald. It looked more like a broken down tractor with an outsized front loader, but that's just my impression. But our congressman didn't even have an office in our town, which was a county seat of Indiana County. That spring, that particular congressman had narrowly defeated a primary challenger who was very much to the extreme end of his party's ideology. But since the opposing party had not even put up a candidate, then that extremist politician flipped over and joined the other party and ran against his challenger once again. And once again, he was narrowly defeated. In that same election, both our state representative and our state senator ran unopposed. These are the choices we get in gerrymandered districts. Now, all this is close to 10 years ago now, and I don't think I have to mention how much our state and our country has changed since then. But there's one really important thing that has not changed at all, and that's the process by which Pennsylvania draws its legislative and congressional districts. The same process which produced in 2011 what was probably the most egregious and corrupt gerrymander in the entire United States is still in place today, and we are still vulnerable to it if circumstances should allow that to be used. So 10 years later, the politicians that we met with and dealt with in 2016 are all gone. They're out of office, and they're replaced by new ones who seem seemingly just as indifferent to the desire of Pennsylvanians, which has been well documented, to get this redistricting reform through. We're also very well acquainted in Indiana County with the kind of strange legal structures and rules of the legislature. In 2016, our state representative was majority leader of the Pennsylvania House. He's now out of office, but right now our state senator is majority leader of the Senate. They represent just a small fraction of Pennsylvania's population, but yet they have the authority to see any bill passed or killed. It's really an outsized power that affects the entire state of Pennsylvania. So, to that end, and trying to kind of get out in front and master this, we in Indiana County have written over 30 letters to the editor and op-eds in our local newspaper. We have presented at business clubs, women's clubs, church groups, libraries, everywhere that we possibly could around the county. We even recently did a presentation in the bar where one of our interns tends bar and deals out the drinks. And we have plans to continue this level of activity as we move into 2026. So the politicians might be gone, but we in Indiana County fair districts are not going anywhere. We intend to stick with this and persist, hope that it's sort of like the kind of game of inches and increments which trickles by unnoticed until the dam breaks and the whole thing comes down, and we're eager for that to happen. And as we move toward the next redistricting cycle in 2030, we're going to be there, and whatever the outcome is, we'll be there after that. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Hayden Johnston, and I am a 22-year-old Pennsylvania voter, also from the great Indiana County over in western PA. I have had the utmost privilege the past 2 summers to work as an intern for Fair Districts Pennsylvania. And during that time, I have traveled to events ranging from Pittsburgh up to the Poconos. I've stayed in State College for a week at the Arts Festival, talking to people at our tables, talking to people with a clipboard in hand, hearing their opinions on these bills, and hearing their opinions on how our congressional districts are drawn. As a young voter, I've had the opportunity to meet people my age who are just as passionate about this issue as I am, who see that as 20-year-olds, we will be living in this system for a long time in the future. We know that we are going to be having these districts redrawn every 10 years, and I know I and all of my peers want these districts to be drawn fairly. I don't want to be standing here in 40 years still working with fair districts, but if that's what it takes, we all will be, because this is an important issue. It's a common sense issue, and it's a bipartisan issue. I've talked to people my age, but I've also talked to people my father's age, my grandfather's age, who agree with my views on this, who hear what I say and think, wow, it's not done that way already. They, just as I do, and just as all the incredible speakers before me have shared, think that drawing our districts fairly contributes to a fair democracy and ensures that all of our voices are heard. I've had the privilege as part of my internship to go and speak to multiple representatives, speak to my senator, speak to Pittman, and they, in those conversations, have also been willing to hear our opinions and hear how fervently the PA constituents want these bills to be passed. It's not twisting arms when we're out there at these events trying to get people to sign. I approach people or they approach me and they're signing immediately. They're asking what else they can do. They're talking about writing a letter to their individual senator, their representative, and they're hearing all of our calls. They are getting our letters. They are hearing how much this matters to all of us, just on a PA level and now on a national level. Of course, we all follow the news. We all know what's going on in other states. But now is the time for Pennsylvania to say we can be leaders in continuing to push for this bipartisan reform, saying we won't let what's happening in other states happen to our state, and saying we will pass protections that actually codify these fair districts and these fair elections for the future of our state. Whether it be in 2030 or if it has to be after that, these are important reforms that need to be passed as soon as they can. So, on behalf of myself, people my age, my fellow Fair District interns over the past couple years, I would love to call on the House and Senate to please pass these bills, and thank you so much for everyone who is here today.
Hi, my name is Jody Reese. I'm from the Harrisburg area, and I became a volunteer for Fair Districts in 2017. And when I became a volunteer, this is a popular theme. This is what we were living with, and so that motivated me. And so today I'm going to tell you about 4 things that continues to motivate me to volunteer for Fair Districts. So this was eventually corrected through lawsuits and lots of money, and but when it was corrected, we were 3 years away from having to do this all over again. We were going to be redistricting the congressional and the state House and Senate maps. I have spent hours investigating both, not just what was said, but what was actually done. I watched videos of meetings. I read transcripts. I dove into hundreds of public comments, and I could give an hour presentation on exactly what happened, and what I found was not even close to being open, transparent, or fair. For congressional districts, the House State Government Committee held 11 public meetings and received almost 800 public comments online, and maps were submitted. They eventually ignored nearly all of those comments. We don't know how or why or who, but they selected a district map submitted online that did not consider any public comments. Our state districts are done by a commission. You've got House Majority and Minority Leader, and the same in the Senate. They get together. They have a 5th member who is the chair. They can't even agree on the chair. Every time the Supreme Court has to come in and choose the chair. They held 15 public meetings and received nearly 6,000 public comments. But debate, negotiations, and maps were all done behind closed doors. We and our other legislators are not in the room when it happens. Today, 10 years and 14 redistricting bills supported by fair districts later, we still have no reform. And without reform, those two processes I just described, it's all we've got, and that motivates me. Number two, there's two. Officials from nearly 400 municipalities and county commissions, small and large, adopted resolutions calling on legislators to pass redistricting reform. These officials were elected to represent more than 70% of the population, 9 million Pennsylvanians. Now wait for it. Of the 24 county commissions that adopted the resolution, 15 had Republican majorities. And that's this chart. And the hundreds of other municipalities also had Republican majorities as well as Democratic. So this is a widespread bipartisan support for this, and that motivates me. Number three, 130,000 Pennsylvanians in rural, urban, and suburban areas have chosen to sign a petition telling their legislators to enact a bill to establish an independent redistricting commission. Those are the red dots. The few white areas you see are the few zip codes where we don't have anybody that has signed the petition yet. Now wait for it. During our November 4th election day, volunteers from fair districts in just 48 polling places collected signatures for more than 4,400 additional Pennsylvanians that need to be added to this map yet. Our numbers continue to grow, and that motivates me. And finally, I'll conclude with what I call the Fair Districts Village. We've all heard and know it often takes a village, and we have an extraordinary group of talented volunteers across the state. It's a village on steroids. We have 66,000 who receive our emails to stay up to date on what's happening and what needs to be done. We have a network of more than 6,000 active volunteers committed to a wide variety of actions. Those two maps that you just saw would have never happened had it not been for those volunteers. And we have a online platform that we communicate with each other, and we've got 1,000 volunteers on that one. And I am telling you that those 1,000 volunteers are ready to assist using their vast talents and knowledge and skills every day. Any question you have, the village is there to answer it for you. And they are amazing, and they motivate me every day. I will end with two short lyrics from the Broadway musical Hamilton that keep replaying in my mind. I promise not to sing them. History has its eyes on me. History has its eyes on you and on our legislators. And finally, tomorrow there will be more of us. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tom DeLoe. I'm here from Adams County. I'm here with this group of people to support an independent redistricting commission. In fact, we represent all areas of the state. In point of fact, the vast majority of Pennsylvanians support an independent redistricting commission. They don't want elected officials, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, to choose their own voters. They want a free and fair election, and they want to choose their voters by themselves. And that's why I am here supporting Senate Bill 131 and House Bill 31. And I'd like to thank you for your support of our bills. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Doug Webster. In 2016, I was invited to a lecture in Pittsburgh about redistricting and gerrymandering and the harm it was doing to Pennsylvanians. And that convinced me to become a volunteer with Fair Districts. In the decades since then, I've delivered over 40 talks in southwestern Pennsylvania to audiences ranging from 1,700 to as small as 4. I've driven back roads so remote my GPS got lost. I've taken and edited thousands of photos and videos and used those to help promote our message. I've visited with my representatives and asked their support. I've written letters to the editor and op-eds. I've stood at dozens of polling places on election days and at fairs, festivals, and community events collecting petition signatures. I've posted hundreds of social media messages, but I'm just one of about 6,000 active volunteers across Pennsylvania. Democrats, Republicans, and independents fiercely united in a belief that Pennsylvania can and must do better. I'm blessed to count many of them as friends, and as Jody said, this truly is a village. The time has come. We want an end to gerrymandering and the hyper-partisanship it breeds. We want citizens to draw our legislative and congressional maps, not self-interested politicians. We've spent a decade doing the work that democracy demands. Because of that work, 2/3 of Pennsylvanians in 3 different polls support independent redistricting, and a recent New York Times poll pushes that figure over 80%. I'm confident if another poll were held in the state, it would be similar. Despite our work and broad-scale public and legislative support for reform, no redistricting reform bill has received a final vote. Since we started, we've supported 14 House and Senate bills. Only one got a hearing. Another made it to the floor where it was saddled with another constitutional amendment, and advocates could not support it. It was then buried in the House under hundreds of amendments. We want politicians to hear our voices. Enough is enough. Pennsylvania is telling you in no uncertain terms, the case for reform has been made. It's time for you to represent us. We want full committee hearings with expert witnesses. We want floor votes in both chambers. And we want you to pass our bills and enable a statewide referendum that lets the voters decide. We're confident it will pass. And if you won't give us hearings, votes, and a referendum, you need to tell us why. Not red, not blue, just fair. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tony Crocamo, and I'm from Lancaster County. And I first volunteered with Fair Districts PA in 2016. That's 9 years ago. I learned that even though the PA Constitution states, and I quote, "Unless absolutely necessary, no county, city, incorporated town, borough, township, or ward shall be divided in forming either a senatorial or representative district." The party leaders who drew the state house maps that were in existence at that time found it absolutely necessary to divide Lancaster Township, a tiny 6-square-mile township. They found it absolutely necessary to divide it into 4 House districts. I was confident that I knew what unless absolutely necessary meant, so clearly something was going on with redistricting, and I continued to do some research, and I soon bumped into Fair Districts PA. And I was attracted to their respectful and fact-based approach, and I filled out an online volunteer form, and since then, the summer of 2016, I've given more than 121 Fair District educational presentations in 25 counties across the state, from Erie to Philadelphia. And with the expanding national gerrymandering wars involving Texas, California, and sadly, a growing list of additional states willing to rig elections rather than let the people decide whom to elect, it is clear that party leaders of both parties have only just begun to cheat. And that's what gerrymandering is. It's cheating. It's the genuine voter fraud. As our nation prepares to celebrate its 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and as our state prepares to celebrate the 250th anniversary of Pennsylvania's first Constitution, we ask our legislative leaders to act in the spirit of both great documents and their oath of office and pass this legislation so it can go to a public referendum. It's time to let the people decide whether they want politicians involved in redistricting or an independent redistricting commission. It's time for the people of Pennsylvania to vote to alter and reform our government. It's time to let the people decide if they want to have politicians drawing the districts. So we're asking leaders to schedule committee hearings, allow expert testimony, then give the bills a vote in committee and in each chamber as soon as possible, then do the same in the next session so that this amendment can go to the voters of PA. Pennsylvania led the fight for democracy in 1776. We ask our legislative leaders to help lead the fight for democracy in 2026. Thank you.
Thank you all. We will be delivering letters to legislative leaders. If press would like a copy of the letter, we have some letters on the table over there. We also have a document that shows recent polling on gerrymandering and redistricting. The largest poll that we've seen yet is an NBC News poll that came out this fall. 30,000 people across the country. 82% said adamantly that there needs to be an independent commission, that legislators, politicians, elected officials should not be the ones drawing the maps. And there are some other polls there that are worth looking at. So if you're with the press, we have some documents on the table. Happy to talk to you. For those of you here, we're going to go deliver letters. So thank you all for being here. And I will talk to you folks for just a minute. We have two groups.